with time-wise. Okay, so we are now recording. Let me get my bearings straight here. All right. So up until now, we've really discussed a lot about how the brain forms from birth to adulthood, with the neural connections, and we discussed in pretty great depth on how we learn as organisms surviving in the world, right? How we adapt to our environment and learn from that. We also talked about how memories form, right? So putting it all together, we're going to kind of delve a little bit more into this human experience, as I like to call it, through cognition, how we set our mind up for learning. And we do that in various ways according to the theories that we're going to talk about. So today we're going to really talk about developmental psychology, essentially really child psychology. And we're going to start by talking about Jean Piaget. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And now the reason why I really go into depth with Jean Piaget is many of you in this class, you're going to be working probably in the medical field or education field, or as a social worker, or even as a therapist, counselor, or maybe even later a psychologist or psychiatrist. So understanding child development is very, very important. That's kind of what Jean Piaget looks at. Now, we look at his theory as like the foundation for all other theories. There are several other theories that kind of spawned up, but they all really have the same essence that Jean Piaget did. And I'll talk about a little bit what those differences look like and where he falls into this. Okay, so hopefully you can, does everybody see my screen? All right. So anyway, we're going to start by discussing Jean Piaget. He is a Swiss psychologist, and his theories really built the backbone for what we know as developmental psychology. So really quickly, though, let's talk about cognitive development. So cognitive development is simply the study of how we acquire the ability to learn, to think, to communicate, and even to remember. And theories of cognitive development vary in three different ways. These are three categories. Some theories are stage theories. We assume that development processes in very distinct stages according to this, right? So think, for example, you have a caterpillar, and a caterpillar turns into a cocoon, and a cocoon turns into a what? Anybody?
Butterfly.
Butterfly, right? We know this. We see the stages, and anybody that's understood how caterpillars turn into butterflies, they understand that it goes through stages. Other theories, conversely, assume that development occurs in continuous stages. Okay, so not necessarily like what we see with one day they're a caterpillar, the next day they're a cocoon, next day they're a butterfly, but more like a tree. A tree just develops slowly and gradually over time without really any distinct qualitative or different stages. All right, so the next dimension that we're going to look at, along which theories of cognitive development vary, is that some theories are domain general theories, whereas others are domain specific. So what do I mean by this? Well, think about different domains of cognition. Domains of thought, if you will. You can think about mathematical reasoning versus linguistic reasoning. You can look at language ability versus thinking morally versus thinking abstractly versus thinking concrete, all of those fun little domains. So some theories assume that domain progresses for all of those different domains, whereas others assume that development is specific in each one of those different domains. So just because language ability happens quicker, they may not develop a strong math ability, if that makes sense. So they happen differently according to the specific. And last but not least, I'm not going to go too much in depth on this, we have differences between theories and the proposed source of learning. And we'll talk more about this on Wednesday and Friday of this week, but essentially what causes cognitive development and what underlies learning over time, okay? So Jean Piaget is really considered the father of developmental psychology because he developed the first major theory of cognitive development. So where does he fit in terms of those dimensions we just talked about in the previous slide? Well, Piaget was first and foremost a stage theorist. He believed that development passes through distinct stages. And really that's what I'm going to be focusing on in this presentation, this lecture today. His account was domain general the account. So he believed that regardless of the specific domain, it was really these stages that underlie development, regardless of whether you're talking about math or language or this or that. It's all dependent on these stages, okay? And he believed that learning experience learning was experience-based. So he believed that children learn to develop cognitively through experience within their world, all right? And this really set the stage for one of his biggest contributions to the scientific community is his view that children are really little scientists. He didn't really see children as sort of, like dumb little objects that are just floating around through this world as blobs, just absorbing some things and forgetting others. He really viewed them as little scientists that experiment on the world in order to understand it better. Even simple things like how babies stick toys in their objects or toys in their mouth, right? Or other objects. Any of you that have interacted with children or have little brothers or sisters or even kids of your own, they like to put things in their mouth. It's a great way to learn about the physical properties of new objects. And you haven't really, if you haven't encountered before, you actually, a great way to really pick out some of the properties like texture and heaviness and even taste, right? And maybe if something, going back to learning, if something has an adverse taste, we don't do it anymore, right? And so he viewed even simple little acts like this as putting things in their mouth as experimentation in the world as little scientists, right? All right, so let's talk about Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Again, this was a stage theory, and there were 4 distinct stages that he believed children pass through in order universally, regardless of where you're from. And we're going to focus on these 4 stages. The first, we have sensory motor stage, and then we have pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and finally, formal operational stage. So we're going to focus first of all on the sensory motor stage. So sensory motor stage lasts from about 0 to 2 years of age, in which the world is experienced through senses and actions. Hence sensory motor stage. Now, one thing I do want to pay your attention to is the 0 to 2 years of age. You'll see me put like 0 to 2, 3 to 7, so on and so forth throughout this. And even in other theories, we talk about ages. Now, the ages are very flexible. They don't necessarily correlate. So at 2 years old, it does not guarantee a child is going to go into the pre-operational stage. It just means that somewhere in there. So these aren't hard and fast rules. These are very fluid. Obviously 0 isn't fluid because it starts right after they're born, but 2 is a very, subjective number. We do know right around 2 is where we see these stages shift. So it's really marked at this stage. It's marked by a focus on the here and now and no thought beyond physical experiences. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is children cannot form mental representations, according to Piaget, in this stage. I remember when I was going through my introductory psychology class, and really I didn't know what mental representation meant. And I think the best way to illustrate this is to form a mental representation through this example. So I'm going to ask everybody to, you don't necessarily have to close your eyes, but simply picture your favorite food. Mine is lasagna. I love lasagna, especially on the second day. I don't know how many of you are with me on that, but it's more, it's more solidified and, anyway, just a lot neater as opposed to the first day when it's sloppy. I'm digressing. I apologize. So anyway, take your favorite food and form a mental image of that favorite food, whatever it looks like, and really create a picture in your mind. If you're able to do that, you have the ability to form mental representations. Okay, that's it. It's being able to hold something in your mind that isn't directly in front of you. Call that image to mind, call that thought to mind, and picture it, right? It's very simple for us. For children at this stage, it's a little more difficult to do that. So create an image, even if it's not there, that's mental representation. And Piaget believed that children in sensory motor lack this ability. Okay. Another key limitation to children in the sensory motor stage, it's kind of related to forming mental images or mental representation is they lack object permanence. They lack the ability to understand that objects are permanent or that they continue to exist even when hidden from view. All right. For example, if you're able to take a sensory motor child and you were to take an object and place that object behind the barrier and the child cannot see it through that barrier, the child would be confused. The child might think that the object is simply gone. It vanished, no longer exists. And they would go about their day like nothing ever happened, right? This is an illustration that children in this stage lack object permanence, okay? So really, that's the sensory motor stage. So let's kind of go on to the next stage here, which is the pre-operational stage, okay? The pre-operational stage, it lasts from about 2 to 6 years of age, in which children use words and images to represent things, meaning that they can now form mental representations, but they still lack logical reasoning. And there are two main limitations of children in this stage. The first one is children in the pre-operational stage, they lack the ability to perform what Piaget called operations. And I'm going to describe that here in just a moment and give you a demonstration with the video here in a little bit. But the second one that he described is children are limited by egocentrism, meaning they view the world from only their point of view. This is a really physical, literal thing that they think everyone sees what they see, but it's also kind of a conceptual thing as well, which I'll show you an example in the video. I think my favorite experience that I like to share with my students is my daughter. When I was military, I was overseas, and I called home and talked to my daughter. And as I'm talking to her, she's answering me and telling me about her day. And she was right about 4 or 5 years old, I believe. And I said, "Is your mommy there?" And it was just silent. A couple seconds later, like 15, 20 seconds later, I said, is mommy there? And still nothing. And after about a minute of doing this, my wife finally picks up the phone and says, are you talking to her still? And I said, yeah. And she said, what do you think? So I was asking her a question. What do you think she was doing on the other end of that line?
Playing.
She was nodding her head yes. Because children in pre-operational stage, they're very focused on themselves, and she was doing her job. She was able to talk, but she didn't know that she had to. I asked her a question, she answered it. Okay, so that's kind of an example. Another example I like to use is children in pre-operational stage. If you ask, let's say little Billy, I like to pick on Billy. Sorry if there's a Billy in the class. If we ask Billy what his favorite fruit snack is, he says fruit bites. You say, okay, so what do you think my favorite snack is? So a child in pre-operational stage, what do you think their response is going to be? What's my favorite snack? What do you think?
Fruit bites.
Okay, fruit bites, right? And we say, what do you think Michaela's favorite fruit snack is? Fruit bites, right? They think everybody has the same preferences they do, which again is egocentrism. And you can, again, try this with somebody in the pre-operational stage, and chances are they're going to do this. So anyway, let's get back to the idea of operations and what that looks like. All right, so here is sort of a depiction of one of Piaget's classic tasks, the conservation of liquids, or law of conservation. So what you're looking at are two cups, same size, filled with liquid to the same level. And you see a third cup in illustration B here. That's a different size. It's obviously much thinner, taller, and longer. And what you do is simple. First, you show the child the first two cups and have them show them that they have the same amount of liquid. And you simply pour one of those cups into a thinner, longer cup. And then you ask the child what cup has more liquid, and either the one on the left or the one on the right. Hopefully, as adults, you realize everybody hopefully in this class is past the pre-operational stage, and you know that they both have the same amount of liquid, right? Even though one of the left looks taller and thinner, we do know that they have the same amount of liquid. Children that are in the pre-operational stage fail this task time after time after time, regardless of how much you show them they have the same amount of liquid. They mistakenly say the one on the left has more liquid because it looks taller, right? And again, I'm going to demonstrate this with the video here in just a bit. So let's go into the concrete operational stage. So let's look at concrete operational in terms of age. We we see about 7 to 11 years of age, roughly, in which children finally understand those concrete events and analogies, meaning they can pass Piaget's conservation of liquids tasks and as well as other tasks, which I'll show you here in just a bit. But in the concrete operational stage, everything is concrete. Laws are laws, okay? A pound of feathers and a pound of bricks, we know a pound is a pound, but to children, they're learning about the physical qualities of feathers. So feathers might be lighter and rocks are definitely heavier. They know that, right? But if we say a pound of feathers and a pound of rocks, chances are they're not going to be able to think that abstractly or think that hypothetically, and they're going to consider the pound of rocks to be heavier than a pound of feathers. All right. So once they've mastered more abstract reasoning and logic, the next stage that they enter is formal operational stage. Okay. And that's where they do develop a little bit more of an abstract thought, hypothetical reasoning, moral reasoning, and able to negotiate more abstract ideas a little bit better. Okay. And that occurs right around 12 years of age on up. And even moral reasoning, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about Kohlberg by the end of the week. I don't necessarily focus on it, but moral development really occurs throughout the lifespan of the individual. So, all right. So that's really Piaget in a nutshell. So what are some limitations to his theory? Because even though he's, again, the father of developmental psychology, his work spurred on decades of research. And there were some really key limitations that we're now discovering. And we know now that some of what he believed was just a little bit off. The first limitation of Piaget's theory is the development of development of children is a little bit more continuous than what he believed. And as far as we know, and for most domains that aren't specific stages, children really pass through them in growth and not necessarily hit milestones. Okay. The next limitation that we do know of his is that he based all of his tasks on high task demands, which meant that it required a lot of mental stress or mental abilities of children in those stages. And plus, there might have been a lot of high demands, high consequences for them meeting those goals. So we do know that children that are in low task demands tend to get a deeper understanding and may even progress through some of those, like object permanence, at a much earlier year than what Piaget thought. And finally, his last limitation, which is probably my most favorite one, and I kind of wish that I could figure out a way to capitalize on my research if I've ever done research this way. But his entire theory was based on the observation of his own 3 children. And I think that's pretty hilarious that he developed a huge theory that changed the face of psychology and created an entire subdiscipline of psychology, all based on experimentation and observation of his own 3 children. Anyway, I think that's kind of cool. So really quickly, I'm going to play a video here that demonstrates how some of these phases occur. Does anybody have any questions before I show this video? Or any comments? All right.
New babies aren't quite sure what happens to objects when they leave their sight. Sky's mom keeps disappearing and reappearing. No wonder peekaboo is so much fun. During their first year, however, infants will learn an important concept: object permanence. Everything has a life of its own, even if it is out of sight.
At Maya's age, babies know to look for the object, but they might not have everything else straight. 10-month-old Simon is about to make a classic mistake. Although he watched us place the toy plane under the white cloth, he'll look for it where he last found it, not where he watched us hide it.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready? Yeah. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3.
As you can say, she has counting down.
1, 2.
She's got the mathematical abilities.
They're both the same.
They're the same?
But watch what happens.
5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away.
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks bigger.
Okay. So
All right, we're going to
size.
play a game with the graham crackers, and we're going to share them between me and you, okay?
Size really dictated
Okay.
how she viewed more or less quantity, even though the logic was there.
Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You share. You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down?
So almost the reverse
Now is
happens
it
here.
fair?
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have 2.
So quantity
Can you
dictated
tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting?
amount.
What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl.
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree? Right. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
Now she asked from where she's sitting, what do I see? And pay attention.
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
So what did he do? What did he point out to her? What is it that he thought that she could see?
His view.
Yeah, his view, egocentrism. All right. Here's an example of concrete mastering of
So
concrete
first we're going to
operation.
look at these two cups right here. Do you think there's the same amount of juice in this glass as there is in that glass?
They're even.
They're even? Okay. So we're going to take the juice from this glass and pour it into this one right here.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to look at this glass and that one. So do you think that there's more juice in this glass, more juice in this glass, or do you think that they have the same amount?
Same amount.
Okay, why do you think that they have the same amount?
Just because this is skinny doesn't mean it's not the same amount. It has the same amount of juice in it, but this one is just wider and this one's skinnier, but they have the same amount of juice.
All right, so we're seeing a little bit more of
It
that
says,
logic.
if you hit a glass with a hammer, the glass will break.
I knew that.
And then this one says, Dawn hit a glass with a hammer.
I knew that too.
So what happened to the glass?
It broke
It broke. Why did it break?
Because the handle's hard.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
No, it won't.
And this is the second rule. Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
Nothing.
Nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen?
Because the feather was soft.
So he's failing to think hypothetically. Okay. So again, a pound of feathers and a pound of rocks. Which one's heavier? They know according to their world what makes the most sense, and they can't break outside of that because they can't apply different rules, which again is abstract and hypothetical thinking. Okay. All right, so that's all I have today. I'm going to stop recording here. Unfortunately, I don't have